I'm sorry that I am joining online and missing a lot of good talks going there. I watched a couple of several videotapes from previous days. Today's one, I didn't watch it, but there are a lot of interesting talks, discussions were there. I feel like my presentation will be in a way that echoing many of the issues that have been already mentioned and a lot in David's presentation. So I feel like I'm doing a kind of summary of many things that have been mentioned. It's 8:30 in the morning here in Washington, D.C. So if I say something which doesn't make sense, that's a time thing, okay? So what I want to do in this short presentation is really to put together attention economy and Buddhist tradition and a little bit of postmodernism. And then David set a ground of details of meditation. And in the previous presentation, including Peter Hoshak's one, there was a lot of discussion about the foundational worldview of Buddhism. So I titled my presentation, Attention, Outward and Inward. So where does attention go? Does attention go outbound to the external objects or internally for self-reflection? And I think this is a very important thing to think about when you compare the concept of attention in various situations. So David ended his presentation saying that there is a kind of distraction in attention in attention economy, and that's where I start my presentation. So attention in the attention economy is obviously more to do with the distraction rather than attention itself. If we really think about certain kind of promotional advertisements, our attention is, we are distracted because the advertisement distracted people from the state they are in, so then they will momentarily attend to the contents of advertisement. So at that moment, our attention is actually suspended. So I'd like to compare this concept of attention, attention in Buddhism, especially I will kind of give a very brief example of two Buddhist schools in East Asian tradition. One is Hawaiian Buddhism, and the other is Zen Buddhism. Hawaiian Buddhism is known as really culmination of East Asian Buddhism, but has not been discussed much in the Western Buddhist scholarship, whereas Zen Buddhism has been very popular. So Hawaiian Buddhism has this practice, among others, especially clearly outlined by the founder of Hawaiian Buddhism in the 7th century, Dushun, which is known as in English, cessation and contemplation. As discussed before, this when we talk about attention, we use several different English expressions, right? Attention, sati, or the concentration, and so on and so forth. So in Hawaiian Buddhism, Hawaiian Buddhist practice, cessation and contemplation has two levels in the practice of meditation. The first stage is cessation, means to cease, to stop. So in other words, our daily life is constantly distracted by various noises. That is life in the secular world. Because of the noises, we do not, or we fail to see things exactly the way it should be seen. So the Hawaiian Buddhist practice, first step is to stop it, trying to stop the noise. If you cannot completely stop it, perhaps trying to manage the noise. And then once you are able to manage the noises, distractions, then you begin to contemplate, concentrate, and trying to see what this reality is all about, or who you are, what you are doing, right? So Hawaiian Buddhism often explain these ideas using the example of a muddy water in a glass. As you see that if you have a water in I have a water bottle, but if I have a muddy water in this water bottle, you cannot see the other side because water is muddy. If I put it on the table and let the mud sit down at the bottom, then the water will become clear and I would be able to see through it. This is a cessation. Stop the mud, let the mud come down, and then trying to see what reality is all about. That's contemplation. So here you see that attention continues to shape one's practice in this case, right? It is not only in the situation, in the case or stage of contemplation that attention is important. Attention is important in both in the process of stopping the noises and distractions, and at the same time, trying to see what the reality is all about. And this is Hawaiian Buddhist idea of practice, whereas Zen Buddhism has a little bit different kind of a practice. Obviously, Zen Buddhism uses process of cessation and contemplation, but Zen Buddhism in many cases more like to have a shock therapy, right? We live in the world where we are constantly being distracted, kind of swimming in a muddy water. And in order to kind of make us realize that we are actually in that situation, Zen Buddhism says that you need a shock therapy. You need something really shocking. So then momentarily you ask yourself, what is this all about? That kind of thing. One of such a method is called Hwadu meditation in Hawaiian in East Asian. So the Zen Buddhist tradition wanted to have more of like a momentary shock therapy, which is known as Hwadu meditation. This what is called gongan or encounter dialogue was very popular, has been very popular in the Western world, right? So this Zen Buddhist meditation training gives you certain kind of a trigger, so then people momentarily think that to kind of examine their own situation, and by doing that, getting an attention from reality, right? So in both cases, either Hawaiian practice of cessation and contemplation or Zen Buddhist Hwadu meditation, shock therapy, attention is one's relationship with external world and at the same time with oneself. David mentioned something similar, right? Having a relationship with being in the world. So it goes both directions. Attention should be a relationship with the external world, but at the same time, one's relationship with oneself and external world. So what it means is that when you talk about attention, the individual, one plays an active role in one's activities. So attention in the context of Buddhist practice is directly related to reflection, self-reflection, right? If we compare this with attention in the attention economy, in the attention in the attention economy, attention blocks the flow and the possibility of reflection in order to draw the audience into the message through which the attention economy is trying to grab that person's attention, right? One's capacity for self-reflection is suspended in that case. And this is what was mentioned before by David. I think the critical thinking is suspended, right? In this sense, attention in the attention economy is outbound, only outbound, right? The kind of people look at the external object, or whether it's an item or it's a promotion, advertisement, whereas one's relationship with the internal world is kind of suspended as the audience is being dragged into the message. Whereas attention in Buddhist practice is inbound, leading the practitioner to attend to their own reality in connection with what one encounters at the moment. So there is a dialogue between external world, the internal world, and the self, right? Active dialogue. Now, I'd like to connect this very brief discussion of Buddhist concept of attention with postmodernism. I mean, in contemporary Buddhist scholarship, the scholars work on to create a Buddhist social political philosophy. But despite a long period of its tradition, Buddhism was not really, hasn't been producing strong social political philosophy. And I think this is where that the intercultural philosophy of Buddhism and postmodernism can be very productive, because postmodernism or deconstruction have very similar worldview with Buddhism, but at the same time, both postmodernism and Derrida's deconstruction are very socially politically engaged, right? So let me give you just a short example using Jean-François Lyotard, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with, who published foundational works on postmodernism, including Postmodern Condition in 1981. Lyotard proposed two distinctive narrative modes. The first one is called grand narrative. The second one is small narrative. And he made a distinction between modernity and postmodernity by using these two concepts. So modernity is related to the grand narrative, right? The grand narrative involves a very big concept, universal concept. The idea of progress of modernity is all grand narrative, right? But not only that, such as freedom, liberty, justice, all this narrative sounds good on surface, but these are narratives created by the center and imposed by the center. And I feel that attention economy, in a way, functions similar to that of grand narrative. When the consumer's inward reflective function is being blocked in the process of consumption of attention and subsequent decision making. Because one's kind of critical thinking is being suspended, one listens to the grand narrative, you should buy this car. Everybody should buy this car, right? Who is this everybody though? Freedom for all of grand narrative sounds great, but who belong to this all? We know that when we say everybody's equal, this everybody does not include everybody, right? And that's grand narrative of modernity. Postmodern small narratives would say that each and every individual has his or their stories, right? Whose attention needs to be given in the context of their existence. When you say freedom for all, who is this all? But what kind of freedom is freedom for me, right? My freedom, the freedom for me might be shared by freedom for each individual in the room, but that there is also differences. If I'm one for like women's rights or the criticism of Western white males world, then some of you might go against that. So freedom means it for each individual a little bit differently nuanced. Right. So then one's attention in this case in small narrative should flow both inwardly and outwardly. Once again, inward movement shows that to see one's position in the life world, and outward position to check the position of other people in one's society. So before I mentioned that one's relationship with the outside and inside and the dialogue between the two in the practice of attention as human capacity. But this small narrative, it's the same. Not only external world, but internal world kind of goes together. Attention then means a reflexive engagement in human capacity, whereas in attention economy, we are trapped, right? And so when we refer to attention as a new currency in the attention economy, we should see the problem of currency, right? Rather than focusing on attention as currency. Everybody wants to have money, right? But then there is an issue that we have to think about with the currency. And the authors of the attention economy qualify attributes of attention as being similar to monetary tool as follows. And this is in a way, the tone of these authors, they are kind of celebrating that attention is currency. So we have to kind of promote this. And they say, why attention is currency? I'm quoting, those who don't have it want it. Even those who have it want more. You can trade it, you can purchase it. People work to preserve and extend what they already have. And attention can be converted into another currency, like accumulating enough E-points by viewing online ads to earn a DVD player, end quote. So here clearly attention becomes a kind of not only a commodity, but some kind of a quantifiable item, right? And I heard that Peter Hoshak's presentation talk about this kind of attention as a quantifiable kind of item and attention as we approach it as a quality of life, right? These simple statements, just as at the beginning of this book, Attention Economy, reflect the different concepts of attention that I have described previously in the context of Buddhist practice and postmodernism, and then attention in attention economy. Now we really have to really think, I think you've been doing it for 2 days, 3 days, is attention as described in the concept of attention economy a fair presentation of the human capacity called attention? Here comes the question of the flattening certain human capacity, which now is called attention, to a commodity that further endangers human agency. And I noticed that the first speaker, Mr. Saliba, talked about the digital addiction. Digital addiction happens because the human agency is lacking in this attention, right? If human agency functions, addiction will not be there, right? So this conversation, I think, like this workshop symposium on the nature of attention, in which we think about how do we broadly define attention and what might be its limitations or importance in facilitating. I think it's important in facilitating interruption. And David mentions it's a disruption, interruption, or intervention in the current discourse on attention. And then this intervention or interruption will create or facilitate certain moment of reflection, as in the Buddhism, right? So interrupting such a use of attention in attention economy and bringing in the very different nuanced concept through Buddhist or postmodern the philosophy is really, I think, important in addressing the risk that attention in attention economy fosters and imposes on human capacity, and turning it to more nuanced understanding of attention and its social function. Thank you. I'll stop here.